Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate Day number 551, 551, September 17th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. Happy Monday. Alrighty, let's talk about Maria Bartiromo's show on Sunday morning. She had both John Ratcliffe and Devin Nunes on. And let's talk about Devin Nunes first. So he's on Maria Bartiromo on Sunday morning, and he says that his committee, the House Intelligence Committee, is going to release witness interviews before the midterm elections. He says that Goodlatte and his committee will likely do the same. Now, Nunes says that there were over 70 witnesses who they brought in. And he also said that most of those, the information is not really classified, so he can just release it, which he's going to do. He says there's about another 30% maybe that would need to go to the DCI or the DNI to get cleared. That would be Dan Coates, but he doesn't think that there'll be that much in the way of redaction, and we should get most of all those interviews clean. So as you can see, we got to remember, as we're going through this entire process that we're going through, as I've mentioned many times before, we follow the facts and the news and the things as we go along, but we don't always consider the politics of things. But remember, these people who we're talking about are politicians. They always consider the politics. So, you know, you can look at Devin Nunes and Goodlatte, and, you know, certainly there's a political variable involved in what they're doing. And so that would explain why Nunes and Goodlatte want to release this stuff just prior to the midterms. It's politics, but it's good politics. So, yeah, there's a political, situation going on here, but that's fine. And of course, it's important that we get the stuff out. When it came out, if it came out 3 months ago or last month or today, I wouldn't really care. Personally, I'm not a politician. But if I were a politician, I may want to wait till a couple weeks before the midterms. So that's all fine and dandy. Either way, just as long as we get this stuff out before the midterms. So that's what Nunes is telling Bartiromo, that he is going to release the witness interviews from his committee, and he says that Goodlatte is likely going to do the same. John Ratcliffe was also on, and he said that they will be interviewing Nellie Ohr this week. That will be in the House Joint Committee, which is the Oversight and the Judicial Committee together, which Bob Goodlatte, of course, oversees. Nellie Ohr will be a very interesting interview. There's a lot of questions they're going to ask her, and assuming she gives correct answers, assuming she answers questions, assuming that she tells the truth, we're going to learn a lot. And it could expose a lot of people. As far as her husband's concerned, he's already answered some questions which tell us a lot. But when we get actually into Nellie Ohr, there might be some additional things that we learn. Particularly, we might learn more about how close a relationship, exactly how she got brought in to Confusion GPS. Who was behind that? Now we know she's had a previous affiliation with the CIA. But it'll be interesting to see if there's any other players that were at work in that. So I think a lot will be learned from Nellie Ohr, and that's probably another reason why they're waiting a couple weeks to release all these witness testimonies, because they still have people to interview, and they still have a couple weeks left throughout probably the rest of September and a good part of October, still interviewing witnesses. And that's why I think that we'll look at this stuff probably being released somewhere in the mid to latter part of October, probably somewhere between the 2nd and 4th week of October, just a couple weeks before the November midterms. I think that's when they're going to release all this stuff, probably about the same time that we get this other stuff declassified by Trump. And I think the main reason he's waiting on that is, I know he's getting pushback from some legal people in the White House, but also because, I don't think he wants to do it during the hurricane and stuff like that. So I think he'll wait a week or two after the hurricane has passed and the cleanups began and things are back to normal in the Carolinas. And then I think that we'll probably see the release of that stuff. And then shortly following that should be the witness testimonies from the two committees. And all this together will learn a lot. And certainly I can just about guarantee it's not going to help the Democrats for the midterms, because they'll be having to do a lot of defense after these interviews come out, because we are going to learn probably quite a bit and probably get some insight into the future after the midterms at exactly who might be getting indicted. And I think it's an awful lot of people that we're talking about here. California is now the most impoverished state in America. California now the most impoverished state in America. And if they elect Gavin Newsom, they're going to turn into Venezuela very quickly. At which point I'll be supporting building a wall on the western border of Canada, or I mean of California, on the western border of California, to keep all those people who come into California in California. Because once they get there and the place turns into Venezuela, they'll be trying to flee throughout other parts of the country. And we don't want them here. So that would be my suggestion at this point. All I can say is, as I said before, to you people out in California, John Cox, he may not be the perfect Republican, the perfect conservative, may not even be a Trump supporter, I don't know. But I know he's a hell of a lot better than Gavin Newsom. And he's not presenting an immigration plan that will destroy the state, what's left of it. Because right now, we can see that California is now the most impoverished state in America. Unbelievable. Should be the wealthiest state in America, to be honest with you. Whew. Lisa Page, good old loose Lisa Page, has testified that at the time the Mueller probe started in May of 2017, that the FBI had no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. So, what was the probable cause that Rodenstein used to launch the special counsel and further investigations? Why did we in fact need a special counsel if there was no predicate crime? Rodenstein is going to have to answer a lot of questions, along with all his friends. Keep in mind, at the time that Lisa Page made this statement, they had already been running, supposedly, an investigation into Trump-Russia collusion for 9 months. Of course, we know they weren't running an investigation into Trump-Russia collusion because they knew there was none. They created that narrative. They manufactured it. They were running a frame-up operation, posing as a investigation. It was a counterintelligence operation, which then became a criminal investigation, without any predicate crime or any evidence. And that's exactly what Lisa Page has stated. That's a problem. That is a big, fat problem. And it's going to be a problem for a lot more people that they interview as well. Because somebody better come up with a reason why they launched this operation on the Trump campaign. They better come up with a reason. And Papadopoulos Downer, that ain't going to work. The dossier's already been completely disproven. So there's really not much there. And they haven't come up with anything yet. But I'm telling you that they better. You cannot launch an operation like this, a massive operation like this, without having some predicate crime. You cannot appoint a special counsel without there being some crime that you're looking into. Some evidence that there was a crime. And apparently they don't have it. A lot of people are going to jail as a result of that. Well, my friends, it is Monday. Dumbass of the week. Well, I think this week is a no-brainer based on the things that happened last week in regards to John effing Kerry, who, as most of you know, served in Vietnam. So, this article from the True Pundit. White House insiders are pushing for a criminal indictment for John effing Kerry for meddling in U.S. diplomacy. Could Kerry be the first person prosecuted under the Logan Act of 1799, which prohibits conducting unauthorized diplomacy with governments in dispute with the U.S.? Let me repeat that. The Logan Act prohibits conducting unauthorized diplomacy with governments in dispute with the U.S. That's what John F. Kerry has been doing, and he admits it. So people now inside the White House want criminal indictments. And yes, they should. They should lock him up. That would certainly shut him up, wouldn't it? Give him the Manafort treatment. He's a traitor and a criminal, and he participated in the deep state coup, by the way. The dossier also passed through his hands via the State Department. He is, in fact, our dumbass of the week. He could be our criminal dumbass of the week, the criminal defendant of the week as well. John F. and Kerry, my guess is he's already had a personal visit by some folks probably telling him, hey, don't do it again. Don't do it again. We're watching. And I bet they are. Kerry's probably under surveillance right now. From the deep state. He is our dumbass of the week. Man, oh man. He deserves every bit of it. He's earned every bit of it. And he's also earned some jail time, in my opinion. I agree with those in the White House who are pushing for this. Absolutely. Positively. Michael Flynn did a hell of a lot less than that. The only thing Michael Flynn did was happen to sit down next to a female British citizen of Russian descent who was placed next to him by Mr. Halper. And that was used to frame him. Everything that John F. and Kerry did was of his own volition. He is working against U.S. interest, and telling the Iranians to wait out the Trump administration is, in fact, meddling in U.S. diplomacy. No question in my mind, John F. and Kerry deserves to be arrested, indicted, and sent to jail. Probably be a good place for him because a lot of his friends are going to be joining him there. This is kind of funny. We have a representative Republican from Louisiana named Clay Higgins. He's now stating that he wants drug testing for members of Congress. Yeah, and alcohol testing too. Drug and alcohol testing. There's a lot of these people get up and they're three sheets to the wind when they're in Congress making those speeches on the floor. I remember John Boehner being drunker than a monkey many times giving speeches on the House floor, as well as Senator Kennedy and others in the past. We also know that they are many members of Congress who get their meds delivered to them, and many of these meds, as I understand, are Alzheimer's type medications. We need to find out exactly who in Congress is on drugs, what type of drugs, and we certainly need to give them a quick breathalyzer before they go up on the floor of the House and start making speeches. Maybe save them some embarrassment. Well, the accuser of Kavanaugh, Judge Kavanaugh, and his friend, Mark Judge, has come forward. And it shouldn't surprise anybody. It's a liberal psychology professor named Christine Blasey Ford. She's a California-based clinical psychology professor. She says Kavanaugh was trying to attack her and remove her clothing. Does anybody believe her? No. Why did Feinstein sit on this? She got this information back in July. She sat on it up until this time. Did this woman file a police report back when this occurred? Did she tell anyone? Are there any corroborating witnesses that can say, yes, she told me this happened? Did she go to the school? Did she go to anyone? Did she say anything to anybody? No, apparently not. What's this tell you? Well, it tells you that this is a left-wing lunatic who despises Trump, wants to throw a wrench in the spokes of Kavanaugh, and she believes that she's morally okay with lying and making up a lie because it's the ends justify the means. In her mind, it's okay to make up this lie because it's for a good cause. Liberals believe in lying if they think there's a good cause, which is any cause that they support. That's how they justify the lies and the criminal activity that they're involved in. So it shouldn't surprise us at all about this woman. She has, no credibility really at all, and this is really going nowhere. But she'll get some TV interviews. She'll probably profit off of it in some way, because the liberals never miss an opportunity to profit on their lies as well. Maybe she'll want to run for Congress. Who knows? She's got some motivation for this, and has nothing to do with truth. I can assure you of that. It will basically have no effect on anything really at all. Just give the left-wing media more gristle to chew on. But, this doesn't surprise us. We see this all the time. Left-wing lunatics can justify anything that they do, based on the fact that they think it's morally right. It's okay to lie. It's okay to do this type of stuff if they believe it's for a good cause. And that's really what's going on here. She believes that she'll be a hero to the left if she comes out and makes up this garbage. So anyway, that's kind of my take on that. I don't put much stock in it, but at least ways now we know who she is. So why did she come out? Well, my guess is the reason that she came out is because you can't keep something like that very quiet. The New Yorker had her name, which means multiple people at the New Yorker probably knew. And we know how these left-wing journalists are. They can't keep their mouths shut. Everybody's for sale, including everyone in the media. So probably someone leaked her name or it got out and she got word that her name was going to be revealed. At which point, somebody probably contacted her and said, hey, this is so-and-so from so-and-so media organization. We know who you are. We now have your name. And we're going to go public with it. But it would be probably better if you just come out and go public, and then we can set it up that way as opposed to just outing you. So she probably had no choice. Some liberal left-wing media outlet probably got her name and decided to contact her and try to spin the story with her. That's most likely what happened. Hard to keep a secret in the swamp, especially with the left-wing media. They can't shut up. The Federalist, Margot Cleveland, asked the question, if Uncle Bob was trying to get to the bottom of Russia collusion, then why didn't the FBI have Papadopoulos reach out to Misfit so that the FBI could get the real story behind Misfit's activities? Misfit was in Washington just 2 weeks after Papadopoulos was questioned. Why doesn't the Mueller report reveal anything really about Misfit, Halper, and Downer? He conveniently leaves these three players pretty much out of the Mueller report, other than when he has to mention their name, but only when he uses the false pretenses that we've been given through the media and through Uncle Bob at this point about these characters. It's a very good question. Papadopoulos, according to his attorney, says that he did offer to wear a wire for Uncle Bob the Executioner to get info on Misfit and Halper. Uncle Bob declined. So here we learn that Papadopoulos, once they had him, and he told them the story about Halper and his association with Halper and Misfit, and he decided, yeah, I'll cooperate with you. Apparently he told Uncle Bob the Executioner, yeah, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you, wire me up, and I'll be more than happy to call Halper. I'll be more than happy to call Misfit. Maybe I can set up a meeting with them. I'll get together and I'll wear a wire. And I'll get you the information you need for your investigation. Uncle Bob wasn't interested. Wasn't interested. Oh, he was very interested in Pops wearing a wire to contact other people within the Trump campaign. But he wasn't interested in having Pops wear a wire to have a conversation with Misfit and Halper to see if he could learn more about their role. I mean, after all, it was Misfit who told Papadopoulos about Russia having the emails. At least that's what's being alleged. Misfit denies it. But if you're Uncle Bob the Executioner, that's exactly what you would want. You would say, yeah, Pops, wear a wire and sit down with Halper, Misfit, and press him a little bit. Press him a little bit and say, hey, about these emails, where did you hear this stuff, or who did you get that from, or whatever, to try to press him a little bit. At least get him on wire is saying that. If for other reason for Papadopoulos, just to prove that what he's saying is true, that Misfit was the guy, because Misfit's denying it now. And the same is true with Halper. Papadopoulos could have got back together with Halper and said, hey, I remember that night we met in London and you were really pushing me on the Hillary email stuff, and now everybody's talking about it. I mean, obviously you knew something about all this. What'd you know, Halper? And where'd you learn it from? Who'd you hear it from? How'd you come into this information? So you see, Uncle Bob didn't want to get Halper and Misfit. He didn't want to get their stories. They would have been two very important people to speak with. But he wasn't interested. And Papadopoulos' lawyer is very interested in why Uncle Bob was not interested. I'm sure the Congress and many other people will be very interested in why Uncle Bob wasn't interested. I'm very interested in why Uncle Bob wasn't interested. Perhaps we'll see Uncle Bob in front of a grand jury answering that question. So, basically, in September of 2016, the FBI used an informant in an effort to snare Papadopoulos and establish collusion between Trump, the Trump campaign, and Russians in their alleged hacking of the DNC. Then, in January of 2017, after Papadopoulos confirmed Misfit as the source of his claim that the Russians have dirt on the rotten Reverend Clinton, and after he agreed to cooperate and interact with Misfit, and after the FBI located Misfit in D.C., the FBI did not use Papadopoulos to snare the supposed Russian agent who had foreknowledge of the alleged attack. That was the justification for launching Operation Crossfire Hurricane. So they have the very man himself, Misfit, who was the so-called Russian source. Papadopoulos was willing to get him on wire, on tape or what have you, and Uncle Bob wasn't interested. Yet, it's Misfit who they claim is a Russian agent, even though he's not. He's a Western intelligence agent. They were not interested in that at all, but they went ahead and launched Operation Crossfire Hurricane into the Trump campaign without ever taking advantage of getting, or confirming at the very least, what Papadopoulos told them about the person, Misfit, who they were using as the source to drive their entire investigation. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. If you're going to launch this investigation, you would have said, okay, Pops has identified the guy who gave him this information, the Russian agent, Misfit. Well, we need to investigate thoroughly Misfit. And then once we do that, if we can find ties between Misfit or anybody he's connected to in Trump team, then we can launch a counterintelligence operation. But that's not what they did. Papadopoulos said, Misfit told me that, and they said, okay, fine. And based on that, then they went ahead and launched the Crossfire Hurricane operation without ever going to the source, which they say is a Russian source, and ever investigating him or looking deeper into that. I mean, if anything, that's the person they would have been investigating. That's the person they would have got the FISA warrants on. That's the person they would have planted spies around. That's the person they would have dug into. Would have been Misfit. He was the guy who supposedly had foreknowledge about the Russians having the emails. There's your guy. That's the guy they should have been investigating, right? Except for the fact that he was working for them, and they knew it. He was part of a setup, part of a frame-up. This is all going to come out. And again, that's why a lot of people are going to jail. And if it turns out that Uncle Bob the Executioner and his team understood this, knew about this, and purposely did not go in that direction or investigate in that direction, it just means that they're part of a cover-up, part of the plot, part of the scheme. That's why I said Uncle Bob the Executioner will probably need a good criminal defense attorney before this is all over. You know, there's a key witness that I'm very interested in hearing from. I know he was on the list of people they wanted to interview. I'm talking about Nunes, and I don't know if it was Nunes' committee or Goodlatte's committee that did the interview, but I'm talking about Sidney Blumenthal. He's a key witness, and we need to hear from Sidney Blumenthal and at least get the transcripts of his interview, because he is a close friend of the rotten Reverend Clinton. He has a close Clinton connection in general, and he's connected to the CIA, FBI coup plot. Remember, he's the one that hand-delivered the Shearer version of the dossier to Christopher Steele via Jonathan Weiner, who was in the rotten Reverend Clinton and John Kerry's State Department. And we know he played a fairly major role as being an intermediary between Christopher Steele and the State Department in moving this information. So, do you remember just about 2 weeks ago when I covered this about Nunes stating that the Clinton campaign colluded with nearly every top official at the DOJ and FBI, and Blumenthal used Jonathan Weiner to get Shearer's dossier to Steele, who then fed it to the FBI. So we have both Devin Nunes and now, as of last week, Bob Goodlatte. Both Nunes and Goodlatte are stating now that the Clinton campaign colluded, and they're stating this as fact. Now, we've had a lot of circumstantial evidence, but we've had, and certainly we know that Blumenthal is close to Clinton and handed off to Steele, but I'm getting the feeling that throughout these interviews that both Goodlatte and Nunes have learned some things that directly connect the Right Reverend Clinton to the coup plot. Certainly there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. She paid for the dossier. She knew Mary Jacoby, knows the Simpsons of Confusion GPS. The interactions of Sidney Blumenthal with the State Department people and Christopher Steele, that relationship there. The sort of almost coordinated statements coming out of the Clinton campaign that were largely consistent with the timing and the byline or the story or the narrative that was coming out of a lot of the left-wing newspapers at the time, that all this stuff was happening in the late summer, early fall of 2016. So we have a lot of circumstantial evidence, but at this point we have not seen a lot of, actual hardcore testimony or documents showing the Right Reverend Clinton being directly involved in, working with the FBI, the DOJ, or the CIA. It's all kind of circumstantial. It's pretty obvious that this was happening in some form we don't totally understand. But if you look at the statements that Nunes and now Goodlatte have made, they're stating in a matter-of-fact way that Clinton was directly involved. In the case of Nunes, he says, with nearly every top official at the DOJ and the FBI. Goodlatte didn't get that specific, but he did say that the Clinton campaign, the DNC, were in cahoots with the FBI and DOJ. So they've learned something from all these interviews that they've been doing, and so we'll be very interested. And I think that Sidney Blumenthal is going to be one of those key interviews, and he's a liar, pathological liar, by the way, like the Clintons. But they'll eventually unearth his lies. But it'll be interesting to see the questions that he was asked and the answers he gave. Because it's pretty tricky when there's a lot of people being interviewed. You don't know what other people are going to say. You have to be very careful about how you lie. But certainly, I think that the biggest bombshell that has yet to be dropped, that will be dropped before too long, I believe, is going to be when we actually do see the physical hard evidence or witness testimony that proves that the Right Reverend Clinton was directly involved in the coordination, the planning, and carrying out of the coup, working in association with the FBI, the DOJ, the State Department, the CIA, whoever. Obviously, that was happening, but we've yet to see the real hard evidence. And so I think that maybe through this testimony, or maybe it will take actual grand jury testimony, maybe it will take court trials and things and such before this is actually glued in. But I do believe that the biggest thing that still remains out there that I think will be the next major bombshell is when the Right Reverend Clinton herself is directly tied to the ongoings, the things that were happening in the coup plot. I think that that's going to be the next really big bombshell to drop. And based on the comments that Goodlatte and Nunes are dropping, I would think that possibly we're going to get a taste of that in the from the testimonies of these people they've interviewed. Let's keep in mind a couple things here. In the last 6 weeks or so, 6 to 8 weeks, we've seen a major change in this story as we now begin to see the walls are closing in. The perps are truly being exposed. All the things that we have been talking about and alleging and suggesting were going on. We now know were going on. Back then it was just circumstantial evidence or just strong belief that it was happening based on common sense and observation. But now we actually have documents, testimony, and various things. Clearly the walls are closing in. It's a bit of a tricky time because we're close to a midterm election, and exactly how this stuff is all handled. Then we had the hurricane come along. So there's some things that are kind of obstructing, but let's keep in mind, and this doesn't matter, it could be because you're a big follower of Q, which is fine. Those of you who follow Q, Q of course makes the case that there's a secret plan. Sessions is part of it, Huber's part of it, Trump's part of it. That's fine. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. I don't know. I'm not one of those people that follow Q closely. Although I have no problem with other people doing it, making comments in the comment section on what Q says. That's all fine. I have no problem with that at all. It's just not it's not the way that I'm going about covering the story. But it's okay if other people chime that in, and it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, if Q turns out to be right, that's fantastic. I'll be celebrating greatly. But I don't necessarily put my faith in Q. If it turns out to be true, that's fine. If not, fine. My faith is in Trump, and it's based on the fact that I just watched this dude just destroy a Republican field. Then I watched him destroy the rotten Reverend Clinton and the deep state all at once. The global deep state. Everybody was trying to take him out. He won. So what that tells me is that Trump's pretty damn smart. It also tells me that for a political rookie, he's pretty damn good at politics. He understands politics very well. So my faith is in Trump. Okay, I believe Trump has a master plan. Whether or not that works with what Q says or doesn't say, I don't know. I don't care. But what I do know, and what I do believe very strongly, is that Trump understands exactly everything that's been happening, that was happening to him during the campaign when we weren't even aware of it. He was aware of it. He knows everything, probably, or as much as you could know in his position. I think he does have a plan. I think he is going to execute it, and I do believe he's got good political instincts. And so, if you look at this thing and you're Donald Trump and you're a guy with good political instincts, when do you want the shit to hit the fan? When do you want to drop the bomb? Well, and this plays almost directly into what Q is saying, because Q is making the observation that all these players are being very aloof, laying low, and allowing the deep state criminals to expose themselves. In other words, giving them all this rope to hang themselves. This is what a lot of what Q alleges is why Sessions is playing it the way he is, and Huber's playing it this way. And so whether or not any of that's true, I don't know. But I know Trump is politically astute enough to understand this strategy that you allow your people to hang themselves. If Trump just went out after these people right from the very beginning, he would have faced huge political headwinds. But if he sits back and allows these people, by baiting them, to come out and continue to go all in against him, and to not just that, but to go all in with continuing the lies and the cover-up and the operations of running against him, they only present and give more evidence that will later be used against them. And then when the time is right, Trump drops the bomb on them, which he can do at any time. He's the president. He's the president. He knows that. He's got that in his pocket, and he's holding on to it. So when he plays that card, I don't know. But if you're politically, just looking at it from a political point of view, if I'm the president and I've got all this and I know what's going on, when I drop it just about the time that the campaign begins for the 2020 presidential election, which essentially happens in the spring right after the midterm elections. The 2020 campaign for the Democrats will begin in the early spring coming up. And that's just about the time that if you're Trump and you've got all this that you're getting ready to drop, that's when you would drop it. And you would let it play out for the entire 9 months or 10 months or a year or whatever it is leading up to the next election. That's when you would do it. That way the story is completely written. The entire history is done. So when 2020 comes up, there may not even be a Democratic Party. That's my thoughts on that. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back with you guys tomorrow. See you. Bye.